Okay, so the disorder that I chose to talk about was social anxiety disorder. The reason why I chose this disorder was just because I've been having a lot of experience with this disorder in my clinicals, with my occupational therapy assistant career, and I have also met three people in my personal life with this disorder. So I was interested in talking about this disorder because it's not very common for people to really know about this social anxiety disorder. People usually just say like, "Oh, I have anxiety," but there is specific types of anxiety, and social anxiety is actually one of the most common types of anxiety. So, what I chose to talk about in my paper, I'm very occupational therapy. I'm an occupational therapy assistant, so I focus on occupations, like routines that it affects, other factors that social anxiety disorder might affect. So the first thing I chose was talking about occupations. So what occupations? Obviously, social participation, leisure, a person's education. Just because with social anxiety disorder, people have a fear of social gatherings, conversation, face-to-face interaction, and also what people think about you and how they might judge you, like even how you're eating. Like people might not even be able to eat in front of you just because they're so anxious on what people think of you. The second one, I just chose to talk, the second paragraph, I chose to talk about factors that it affects. So obviously, like routines, it affects everybody's everyday routine by going to a grocery store, going to school, going to work. Um, Also, one of the major things I talked about in my paper is relationships, how social anxiety disorder affects relationships, romantic relationships, friendships, relationship even within family. And then what interventions help with social anxiety disorder. So obviously what I use to treat social anxiety disorder when I work with someone with social anxiety disorder, I use cognitive behavioral therapy. So even like I had one client that we made flashcards and we practiced on how to start a conversation. Like that was really hard for her, so we practiced on how to start a conversation. What else did we do? We did group work as a like within her. It was like a group home she was in. We did a lot of group work, like crafts and stuff like that, so she can get used to interaction because she really isolated herself. So there's different types of interventions that you can do with people with social anxiety disorder. Also, collaboration. I talked about collaboration. It's important you collaborate with other professionals. So, me as like an occupational therapy assistant, I collaborate with the PT if they're in physical therapy, or I collaborate with the counselor, the case manager, whoever. But it's good to work in a multidisciplinary group just to get the best interventions for that client. So again, I also touched back on relationships and anxiety, social anxiety. In my paper, I touched on it twice, just because it's a really common topic to ask when you have social anxiety disorder. People are like, how do you maintain a romantic relationship? So communication is key. Also expressing how you feel to your partner and talking about your disorder, which can be extremely hard because not many people take this disorder seriously because it's not seen. I chose to also talk about my personal experience. I had a girl in my speech class that had social anxiety disorder. It was very interesting. She did not pass because she just did not want to give a speech. And I know years later she didn't end up graduating college just because she was so nervous of giving speeches and presentations. I also chose to talk about social anxiety and alcohol abuse because that's how usually people with social anxiety disorder manage their symptoms. And I chose about online, like social media and real life interactions. A lot of people with social anxiety disorder like to hide behind a screen just because it's easier and they don't feel like they're being judged, and that's how they create relationships. I also talked about my personal experience with someone with social anxiety disorder on social media. She was in my dance group, and she was this awesome girl. Like she had a lot of conversations with me in my dance class, but when you talk to her in person, she wouldn't even say anything to you. But I also included some personal thoughts, and that was my paper.